What's going on, everybody? It's the Reformation Keegan, and I'm back here with another video. So, we're going to continue on with another one shot analysis because I think these are going to be a lot of fun to do, and these are going to be an individual series on my channel. So, like I said, as many of you know, I usually do an analysis on longer arcs, longer stories. So, I actually, on top of that, want to make a quick announcement that I have read all of Batman Venom. So I think that's going to be an analysis that I do relatively soon. So stay tuned for that because that story was incredible. I think it's super underrated. And I honestly think it's one of the better Batman stories. And that is saying a lot because I think in all of comics, Batman probably has the best collection or the best library, for lack of a better term, of stories. So I think that's going to be really a really fun one to do. But another individual who I believe could have an argument for having the best collection of stories ever is basically Superman. So Superman has a lot of really good stories. And one of the things that I think makes a great Superman story is the less is more approach. And the less is more approach in comics is, like I've said before, a comic writer's best friend, because sometimes some comic writers, they overcompensate prose for the actual story that they're trying to convey, and that prose overshadows that story that they're trying to tell their respective audience. So Superman stories are a perfect example. So you have stories like Birthright, Secret Origin, All Star Superman, Last Days of Lex Luthor, a lot of the Red Sun. There's a lot of really good stories. But one of the more underrated aspects of Superman is his one-shot stories. And Jeff Loeb, being one of my favorite writers, does a really good job of conveying emotional effect, aka pathos, if you've ever taken rhetoric. So today we have Superman 178. One thing I love about this cover is, one, you get the Max Fleischer Superman design, or it's like a Max Fleischer and Kingdom Come kind of put together. So Alex Ross basically drew a logo like this for Kingdom Come, but also this has a lot of Max Fleischer connotations from the 1940s. And speaking of that, if you've never read Superman Smashes the Klan, it's another Superman story I highly advise you check out. So this is illustrated by the great Ed McGuinness, and if you don't know Ed McGuinness, one of my all-time favorite comic artists, he has this powerhouse style that became very prominent in the 90s with Jim Lee, but I find that Ed McGuinness does a good job at updating this art style. And as you can see on the cover, it's a theme of America, right? We have the big American eagle, and Superman represents American culture to its finest. So this one is titled The Spirit of America. And one of the reasons I'm doing this analysis today is because it's Remembrance Day. And Remembrance Day is huge in American culture and is huge in Canadian culture as well. So I'm really excited to discuss this one. And as always, I have my handwritten notes. And if you don't handwrite notes now, I highly recommend you still do so, because it actually helps retain your memory when you are analyzing something or discussing it with somebody else. When you handwrite it, your hand connects to your mind, and vice versa. So I still recommend handwriting as a master's student right now. So anyway, so this story basically revolves around the following question: which American way is the right one? So we've heard this term many times, the American way. What does the American way mean? Is there one meaning, or are there multiple meanings? This phrase is very ambiguous. And one of the things that I think represents America is ambiguity. And I think that's what this story is conveying. So Uncle Sam is manipulated by Lex in this story because, of course, he is, and this has a lot of Smallville traits. I could see in Smallville Uncle Sam being brought in and being manipulated by Lex. And it's actually around the time that I believe season 1 of Smallville was concluding. This is March of 2002. So I think they were ending the first season and eventually going into the second season in 2002, that is. So Uncle Sam is manipulated by Lex, and an individual brings information to Lex that exposes Clark's secret. And I think we all know what Clark's secret is. And this phrase secret, again, is very synonymous with Smallville. So I'm thinking at this time, Jeff Loeb who was helping produce Smallville and writing episodes, was connecting what he was doing with Smallville to a lot of these one-shot stories. And I think this story right here is very, very evident. And we also have to remember that March of 2002 is not far off from 9/11, which took place in September of 2001. So we're still under a year of the 9/11 catastrophe. So I think Jeff Loeb is taking what he's doing in Smallville, and he's taking that context and he's putting it into his one-shot comics, because this story is still revolving around Clark's secret, and Lex will go to any means necessary, even manipulating Uncle Sam to get what he wants, and that is Clark's secret, so then he can, one, expose it to the world, and two, he can deem Clark a threat, because Lex is always asking the question, well, what if this Superman individual is uncontrollable? What do we do? So really, Lex's plan is justified, but also he goes in a very villainous way to execute those plans. So there's a double-edged sword there. And the one thing that we're noticing in this story is that America is changing. America is not the same. Even America from 2000 to 2001, huge change, right? And the traditional values of America are in question, right? So the traditional values should accompany what's going on in the story, but the thing is which traditional values should accompany this change? And due to his own past, Clark in this story believes that America is basically about universality and making a nation derived from all different cultures, which is essentially what happened in the formulation of the United States. So when you take a bunch of these different cultures, you formulate a nation, aka united in the United States. But what happens is the scope of American culture can get marginalized, and we fall under this dogma that there's only one American way. But Clark is challenging that and saying that the American way is universal, and the American way derives from all cultures coming together as one to make one big universal nation. And what we see here is it takes place, like I mentioned earlier, after 9/11. And this is right when Clark and Uncle Sam discuss the World Trade Center, and they look on in the distance, which is a very, very emotional image. You can see them standing, and they're kind of looking in the distance at almost a sunset in this story. So a lot of emotion was put into the story. Again, this is Jeff Loeb's greatest strength. And what we get from here is, again, more connotations to Smallville, which represents traditional America, as do Martha and Jonathan Kent, not just in Smallville, but in this story too. So again, we're getting this compartmentalization of Smallville with the Superman ongoing arc. Like we have apple pie, obviously, in this story as a symbol of America, which also Martha Kent uses food in Smallville to connect to her American traits. And as Clark and Uncle Sam watch America, and specifically Topeka, Kansas, they watch it rebuild itself, and a comment is made that they wish America didn't need to learn lessons over and over again. And as we can see in the current climate in 2025 going into 2026, America is still learning. America is still evolving as a nation. And sometimes in cultures, we need to make mistakes over and over again in order to learn, and then make less and less mistakes, because life in a lot of instances is making mistakes. It's just making less mistakes than you need to make. There's no such thing as perfection. And that's something too that Clark has learned, is that perfection doesn't exist. You can have all the powers that you want, but Clark is still a flawed individual emotionally, which isn't a bad thing. That's what makes Clark as an alien human. So America making mistakes over and over again is very synonymous with Clark and Uncle Sam looking on in the distance, because America prides itself off of being a top pristine nation, and it should. But the one thing that keeps happening is the same tragedies keep repeating, And this creates a question of what do we do within the facet of the American way to stop these tragedies from happening, and how do we lessen these tragedies? So I think this story brings forth a really, really big, complex question. And there's another good piece of symbolism in this where Clark tells Uncle Sam that people are America, not the president who's Lex Luthor. So one of the things that I think gets misconstrued, if we're looking at this from a perspective of realism and societies, is the president, prime minister, king, whoever, they are not that nation. The people make the nation, because if you don't have anybody to govern, your nation's not sustainable. So the people are really running the nation. And a president or prime minister, in a lot of ways, maybe in every way, should work for you instead of you working for them. That's the goal, right? So that's basically what Clark's bringing to the table here, and what Jeff Loeb is conveying to his audience. And if you have everyone working for Lex as a president and also as the leader of Luthor Corp or LexCorp, that's going to be a very, very problematic image, because you're going to have somebody that's almost running a dictatorship. And that's not going to be sustainable for people in Smallville, much less all of America, or even Metropolis, for lack of a better place, because Metropolis, although it's fictional, really shows how America can be governed into one single entity. So the Statue of Liberty also exudes freedom and, well, liberty, and Lex does not. And that's also another symbol that we have in this story that I think is very synonymous with America. And I think that this story really symbolizes not what Jeff Loeb thinks America should be, but what America basically started as. And what can we do to get back to that place in America? But the thing is, this was written in 2002, so this was written 24 years ago, almost 25. So this was written almost a quarter of a century ago. And 25 years later, approximately, we're still asking these same questions now more than ever. So I actually think that this is aged really well. And not only is the art great, but the stories are great. And this is just a one-shot story. This isn't even a big story. So I wanted to post this today on Remembrance Day, because Remembrance Day is a huge day that we should all celebrate. And hopefully there's going to be more care for our soldiers going forward. And if you have never watched Band of Brothers, I also highly recommend watching that as well, because it really conveys the spirit of not just being a soldier, but the spirit of America and, honestly, even Canada. So that is Superman in the Spirit of America. And most of all, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe. We are really close to reaching more subscribers. We just hit 500, and the goal is to hit 1,000. So let's get to 600, and then 700, then 800, then 900, and eventually 1,000. So if you can hit the subscribe button, they would be greatly appreciated. If you have any more suggestions, let me know. I know there was a suggestion about me doing facsimiles for larger stories that have a huge historical impact on characters or events within DC or Marvel. I'll be glad to do those eventually. That is something on my list that I will probably make a category for later on. And in the meantime, I'm going to do more one-shots, and I'm going to do more bigger arcs. So I'm going to try to get Batman Venom done soon and post that. And in the meantime, I'll be uploading some shorts that I have already recorded. And those are going to be pickups that I've made, or just mini reviews of current comics that I'm reading. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.